I started noticing a trend online and in foodie social media. I started noticing that there were things that were getting names or hashtags as if they were new and shiny, but they were things we had already always been doing, like meal prep. Meal prep isn't new, but suddenly it's this very Instagrammable trend. But the other one that really got me was sheet pan suppers. But wait, we already know what this is. It's called baking. We've been doing it for a very long time. But it hit me that social media gave this a new life, made it new, made it something different when it's actually just a traditional way of preparing food. So I wanted to get to the bottom of it, the origin story, if you will, of what a sheet pan supper is and how we came to this place that we call it this very trending, hashtagable name. So first up, we're going to talk to Molly Gilbert. She's the author of Sheet Pan Suppers. And we're wondering, did her cookbook from way, way back in 2014, did it kick all of this off? And then I bring on Lili Courtney, my friend and fellow cooking instructor, who is, I would say, an expert in sheet pan suppers. She's taught a dozen classes in my shop, and we're going to get her take on this trend. And then we are going to explore the power of the foodie social media with my very own social media manager, Chelsea Blankenship. She'll be here to talk about our phones eating first, which is a thing, and what that means for all of us. And then finally, we talk to Erin Bowling. She's a local influencer here in Baton Rouge, and she is the person behind Eat Baton Rouge Instagram account. And she helps us gain more insight on the influencer world. To finish off all of this and get to when we finally wrap up our origin story of the sheet pan supper, we're going to head to the Red Stick Spice Kitchen with Sarah, and we're going to cook up a sheet pan carrot taco that's absolutely delicious. I'm Ann Milneck, chef, owner of Red Stick Spice, and amateur social media sleuth, and this is Smidgen.
You're listening to Smidgen, the Red Stick Spice Company podcast, located directly between a dash and a pinch, where it's all about the tips, tricks, and tools to make home cooking easy and doable. We did our research, and it's proven. Mealtime's where it's at. And now your host, Ann Milneck.
Molly Gilbert is a chef and food writer. She is the author of the cookbooks One Pan and Done and Sheet Pan Suppers. Her blog, Dunk and Crumble, is filled with delicious recipes, along with lots of witty writing, which I love. Molly and her friend Sarah have a podcast called And Eat It Too, and I listen to lots of food podcasts, and this is one of my new favorites. I love food, and I love words and phrases, and this podcast really puts them together in a clever way. I'm not going to say anything more because I want you to go to your favorite podcast app and subscribe to it and listen. But welcome, Molly. How are you?
Thank you. I'm great. How are you?
Very well. So thank you for obliging me with this conversation. I appreciate you obliging me and answering my email as I try to do this origin story of sheet pan suppers. So I went in and did some very scientific research, and I asked Google. I started going to big recipe sites like Epicurious and just typing in the search term sheet pan supper. And I came up with Dory Greenspan's sheet pan chicken with apples from 2015. And so then I was like, wait, I jumped over to Amazon and searched, and there was your book, which P.S. was already on my shelf. And my producer, Catherine, had it on her shelf. And isn't that great? And it was published in 2014. So I don't know if you want to take credit for Dory Greenspan writing a sheet pan supper. I would if I were you. But you actually let me know that it was a recipe from 2012 that inspired you to write the book. So tell everyone about how that happened for you and how you got to the place where you wrote this book.
In 2012, Bon Appetit published a couple of sheet pan recipes. I forget the exact recipe, but it was like a Caesar chicken with charred romaine, and then there was another one. It was like a pork saltimbocca or something. And my then editor, Kylie Fox McDonald at Workman Publishing, saw the Bon Appetit recipes, and it sort of sparked an interest in her and an idea that maybe you could do a whole book about, sheet pan cooking. So she and I had a conversation about it, and I was already, being like a trained chef, we use sheet pans all the time for everything. So I was already using sheet pans all the time and not really realizing that home cooks didn't necessarily. I just jumped on the idea and I loved it, and started experimenting with different recipes and different techniques and different, obviously you can do meats and vegetables, but also my book has like a brunch chapter and desserts, and sheet pans, are just so versatile. And I'm not exactly sure why it struck such a chord with people, but, I published the book 5 years ago, and sheet pan suppers are a trend that are going strong. I still see them all over the place. I think something about having everything on one pan and in the oven, so you're not like standing over the stove stirring something or cooking in batches, and the fact that the pan is such a simple piece of equipment that most people already have. It's not like you have to go out and buy a crock pot or an Instant Pot or even like a Dutch oven. People love those as well, but sheet pans are just so simple. They're inexpensive, and it's such a hands-free, mess-free way of cooking. I don't know. People just really kind of took to it.
You mentioned that a lot of folks probably already have it in their kitchen, but just very quickly, if they don't, where are some go-to places for folks to get the sheet pan? And if you don't mind, clarify the dimensions, because, as a chef, there's a full sheet pan, a half sheet pan, a quarter sheet pan. What are we talking about for the home cook in terms of dimensions that will fit in their oven?
A sheet pan that I'm talking about, it's an 18 by 13 inch pan with like a 1-inch little lip around the sides. Professionally, they're called a half sheet. They're slightly different than a jelly roll pan, which jelly roll pans are a little bit smaller and less sturdy. So a sheet pan is what I would get. You can get them at any sort of kitchen supply store, like a Williams-Sonoma or Sur La Table. Amazon has plenty of them on offer. If you want to get one extra cheap, try and find like a restaurant supply store. They'll sell tons of those and at a really good price.
In your introduction to your book, and I am learning quickly that reading the introduction to cookbooks is super helpful. Who knew? But everybody, please read the introduction. But in your introduction to your book, you describe what happens on the sheet pan in the oven. It is an absolute perfect description. Can you paraphrase that for us?
Yeah, let me think back and try and remember exactly what I wrote. But yeah, I mean, as you know, cooking on a sheet pan in your oven, you're baking, you're roasting, and you're broiling. And those methods of cooking allow the air from your oven to really circulate around the food on the pan and caramelize, basically create these really crisp exteriors and juicy, flavorful interiors. So again, it's you sort of letting your oven do all the work and all that nice hot air of your oven and not having to do any hands-on work yourself. And it really creates such flavorful food.
As you worked on the book, I'm curious, that whole browning and the juicy interior, that's just where it's at with cooking. I'm curious, as you worked on the book, what were some of your aha moments as you tested a particular ingredient or dish or combination of ingredients? What were some where you were like, whoa, that worked, and it worked really, really well?
Yeah, I feel like I had a lot of those moments, actually. I mean, despite using sheet pans for a lot of things before then, spending my energy focusing purely on sheet pan cooking really gave me a lot of revelations. But fruit in particular, whether it's in a savory application or in a dessert, roasting fruit is just so delicious. Because you kind of do get that caramelized, little pockets, but then the fruit itself becomes super juicy. I have a recipe in the fish section for salmon and roasted cucumbers, and I had never roasted a cucumber before. And if you haven't, I highly suggest that you do because they're delicious. It's like something I think would never think to do, but so good. And then now I make all my grilled cheese on a sheet pan. It's just so easy.
Right?
So what's that?
Right? Slab grilled cheese on a sheet pan? How am I?
Over the stove, you can make 6 at a time if you need to, or more.
Yes.
Sheet pans for the win there.
Absolutely, absolutely. My producer Catherine is having a moment here because the Persian cucumbers on the sheet pan with the salmon is something she did recently, and I was just head tilt, what? You want me to do what? But yeah, roasted cucumbers. Oh my goodness, amazing.
Who knew?
Right. I think something that happens with a lot of cooking techniques that get popular and receive a lot of buzz, like sheet pan cooking, sometimes the home cook takes it as this magical solution. I recently interviewed an Instant Pot cookbook author, and he talked about a question he received. I think it was someone asked him how to cook a Thanksgiving turkey in an Instant Pot, and he was like, "Okay, guys, it's not a magic pot. You can't do everything in it, and some understanding of how certain proteins cook, how certain ingredients cook is required here." So I'm sure you stumbled on this as you worked on the book, and I'm not trying to be negative here, but I do want to talk about any pitfalls you might have come across as you were working on the book. And again, not to be negative, but these are lessons that make us better cooks. So did any of those sorts of things reveal themselves to you?
Yeah, well, there's some things that obviously don't lend themselves quite as well to cooking on a sheet pan. A lot of grains like rice or pasta, sheet pans are great if you want to roast some veggies in pancetta or something to throw over your pasta or, into your rice bowl or something. And I do have like a quick hack where if you really, really wanted to do it all in a sheet pan, using frozen rice, I found, in a pinch works if you don't have time to make regular rice or whatever. Mm-hmm. But obviously, things like those types of grains just aren't really set up to do their best on a sheet pan. But aside from that, I'm hard-pressed to find a lot of things that wouldn't work somehow on a sheet pan setup.
I want to dive into a couple of dishes that I picked out as like my to-do list to do this weekend that I'm going to cook this weekend. I want to send you a picture of both me and Catherine's books because they're all marked up and there's Post-its everywhere and index cards. And I just love that we already had these books. I dove in, and top of the list is going to be the baked brie with strawberries, roasting the strawberries right on the pan with the baked brie. Roasting strawberries is something fairly new to me, and we're at the tail end of it, but we have a beautiful strawberry season here in Louisiana. And I'm just here to say roasting a strawberry is like my new favorite thing. I'm curious, did you play around with wrapping the brie in pastry at all, or were you always just straight on the pan with the wheel of brie?
For this particular recipe, I did not play around with it. You certainly can if you want to. My intention for the book was to try and make things as simple as possible and still keep like amazing flavor. And I found that just sticking the brie right on the pan and then having like crackers and things to scoop it up with was equally yummy to me. So I know it's sort of like a classic to wrap cheese and bake it, and you could definitely do that. But I just found this to be kind of the simplest food to mouth with like maximum flavor thing. So that's what I went with.
And I also love that, I've noticed a trend where, dinner parties have gotten more casual and less fussy. And I think just putting that sheet pan right there on the counter for my guests is with a crusty baguette or, crackers, things like that. I think that's just beautiful. And by the way, I just want a public service announcement. If you're trying to scrub that golden brown stuff that's on your sheet pan off of there, are you with me, Molly? Everybody can just stop doing that.
Oh, yes. That's all flavor right there.
Agreed. Okay. So the next one on my list, I picked a second appetizer because I couldn't pass this one by. Let's talk about roasting mushrooms on a sheet pan, and then your burrata and the crostini. Now, this is a 2-sheet pan method because the mushrooms in the crostini roast at different rates. Not a big deal, though. But let's talk about taking a mushroom away from that place of that like kind of braisy, in a sauce situation and letting that thing crisp up on the sheet pan. That recipe looks amazing.
Yeah. For me, that's sort of the way you get like the mushroomiest flavor from your mushrooms. They're not in the sauce. They're not sort of like soaking up the flavors of anything else. They're just like pure mushroom flavor with, obviously the olive oil and the salt and pepper, just emphasizing everything. But they get like a little bit crispy in parts, and that they stay like pretty tender on the very inside. That's actually one of my favorites. I haven't made that in a while. That's a good reminder.
Would your tip there be in terms of cutting the mushrooms? Let's say you had 5 different types of wild mushrooms, cutting them all in similar sizes. I mean, let's maybe talk to the person who has let's say you have a portobello and a cup of shiitakes. What would be your approach there?
My approach, you hit the nail on the head, is similar sizes is best. When you're roasting or baking or anything, like variations of things, or even, different meats and veggies or whatever, in general, you would love everything to be the same size, because that means that the heat is sort of going to penetrate everything at the same rate and cook them all at the same time. So you won't be left with like big chunks of portobello that aren't quite done, and then, the delicate shiitakes that have sort of gone too far. So yes, that's my tip. Try and cut everything about the same size.
And then talk about overloading the pan. What should that pan look like in terms of visibility of sheet pan between pieces?
Yeah, so, you want the pan pretty covered with mushrooms, but you don't want like layers of mushrooms on top of each other. Just a single layer will make sure that you get those crispy pieces and that the mushrooms don't steam and just get more soggy. Yeah, a single layer is also a great tip to take away from sheet pan cooking.
Okay, my next pick was the balsamic shrimp with summer vegetables, which we're about to have a summer vegetable moment in Louisiana with mainly summer squash and zucchini, and okra might be good on there. But talk about quick cooking proteins like shrimp and say white flaky fish. Talk about a little bit about the maybe rules there in terms of how you would pair that up on the sheet pan.
Sure. When you're cooking something like a shrimp or a fish that's a little bit more delicate, you either want to cook it with similar vegetables, like a delicate vegetable, like a, summer squash or zucchini, something that won't take a really long time to cook, nothing like, if you wouldn't put whole Brussels sprouts, say, on the pan with your shrimp, because the shrimp will cook in no time and the Brussels sprouts will still be kind of woody and tough to chew. But if you did want to cook a heartier vegetable with a shrimp or a fish or something, just stagger the times. So throw the kind of sturdier thing on the pan first, say Brussels sprouts, go back to that one, get that going in the oven, and then at the end, throw the shrimp on and let those finish cooking with the rest of the dish. So it's, it's sort of a two-step thing, but it's not like you're standing over the stove trying to time everything with your hands in a bunch of different bowls and pots and spoons and all of that stuff. So you keep the simplicity, but you sort of break it up into steps to make sure that you have the best and most delicious result.
Yeah, just 2-phase or 2-stage cooking. Not really the only thing you're tied to is your timer. Just, knowing when to throw that protein in when the timer goes off. So another dish that I highlighted, because I have a daughter who's vegan-ish, and I try to stay plant-based about 75% of the time, and we talk about another moment we're about to have in Louisiana is eggplant. They're about to be everywhere. So, oh my gosh, roasted, crisped, topped eggplant with chickpeas? Come on. That's amazing. Talk about the magic of putting a chickpea on the sheet pan, because I see it in your book a couple of times.
Yeah, well, so chickpeas are so versatile, especially if you're not eating meat. I have a recipe in the appetizers for like a crispy chickpea situation, and this recipe that you're talking about with the eggplant is a little bit different because the chickpeas cook underneath this like layer of eggplant, and then like a crispy sort of panko topping goes on top of it all. So the chickpeas don't get very crispy and crunchy in this scenario, but they still warm through and sort of give like a weightiness and meatiness to this dish with the eggplant, which I just love.
Wow. It sounds amazing. Okay. So, and I just want to give my friends in Louisiana a heads up on page 166 of this book. There is the answer. I get this question all the time. What do I do with this roly-poly squash? What you do, Louisiana friends, with all those roly-poly squash we're about to have is Greek stuffed roly-poly squash. in Molly's book. It looks so good. I do want to talk about dessert. I've done slab pies, I've done sheet pancakes, but something took me really by surprise in your book. And you do a cardamom pound cake on a sheet pan. And when we think of pound cake, we think of either a loaf or a bundt. And you take that pound cake batter and you do it in a sheet pan. How did that even enter your brain? Like, how did that happen?
Sheet cakes in general aren't something totally new, but baking something in a sheet pan, it's not really something I had done before. Obviously, you use a cake pan and use a 9x13 pan or something, but baking something like this pound cake in a sheet pan was sort of a revelation, because at the end you have this giant, shareable, beautiful cake. So instead of having to worry about, frosting and layering and, making sure sides are even and stuff like that, which sometimes cakes can be a little bit intimidating, I found that cakes on a sheet pan are just such a simple, kind of whimsical, lovely thing if you're going to feed a crowd. Obviously, if it's just you or just two of you, sheet pancakes might be a little bit overwhelming. But yeah, baking cake on a sheet pan was another revelation that I had while testing this book.
Well, and I love them. That's something you could bring to your office if you're feeding coworkers or to a gathering. But I love the idea of this unfrosted pound cake on this sheet pan that can be broken into pieces. You could set up like a little mini trifle bar with fruit and cream or something like that for folks to assemble their own little fresh fruit trifle. So I thought that was just a great idea, and it's on my list of things to make. Before we wrap things up, I do want to go back to my original being a grumpy Gus about this whole sheet pan supper being a thing. Give us your take on how social media has latched onto this. And, let's be honest, we're business people. It's good for us for sure. But what's your take on this rise of social media posts on sheet pan suppers?
Yeah, it's been fascinating to watch. Obviously, with social media, things get shared and, replicated so quickly. And something about this, I don't know exactly what it is, has obviously really struck a chord. I think that, people are busy, but now people, food and sort of food personalities are much more popular now than they were years ago. And I think, you can feel like a really awesome cook making meals on a sheet pan. And I don't know, I guess people have really kind of enjoyed that and are going strong with the sheet pan method.
I agree. It's a great way to feel really successful in the kitchen. Okay, so to wrap things up, I'm going to ask a question I ask most all of our guests. Specifically for you, though, if you had to teach a brand new cook, one sheet pan supper, what would you teach them?
Wow, great question. If I had to teach a brand new cook one sheet pan supper, well, obviously it depends on, what kind of eater you are. Are you more of a meat person? Do you like fish, or are you vegetarian? But the one that I get the most feedback about that people have really loved is on page 52. It's the quick chicken and baby broccolini with spicy peanut sauce. That one comes together super quickly. Something about the peanut sauce is just like drinkable. You can use it for I actually just made it a couple of nights ago, and I used the sauce on some cold noodles. We had a heat wave here, so I made cold noodle salad with peanut sauce. But that one is definitely a winner.
Yum. Okay. We're going to link to all of this information in our show notes, where you can get her book, all the recipes we talked about. And Molly, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. We just emailed a day ago, and here we are. I think we're fast friends, right?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
This was so fun. Thank you so much, Molly.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Molly. Now let's talk with Lili Courtney. We are joined by Lili Courtney. Lili is a cooking instructor. She teaches classes at my shop and also at a beautiful gourmet store in New Orleans called Simply Gourmet. They also have a location on the North Shore of New Orleans in Louisiana in Covington. She has been teaching cooking classes for 25 years. She hails from Alexandria, Louisiana, has lived here in Baton Rouge for 5 years, And we are lucky enough to have you as an instructor in the shop. And I'm so glad you're on the podcast.
I'm thrilled.
Oh, very cool. So this episode is all about me being super cranky about this trend of sheet pan suppers, which is crazy to me. Like it's it's out there like it's new and shiny when it's been here all along. It's just called baking. But as you know, I've come around. We teach the class. It took you a while, though, to convince me to teach this class because I was like, come on, this is bananas. Like people know how to bake. Why do we need to teach this class called Sheet Pan Suppers? And as you know, you've taught it, I counted, you've taught it a dozen times in my shop in the past, say, year and a half or so. And we sold, so I was very wrong because we sold out the class. And most of the time we could sell it 2 and 3 times over. So it's been absolutely super popular. Now, it has seen an evolution in the store. We now call it skillets and sheet pans because the beauty of a sheet pan is you put all the ingredients on the sheet pan, it goes in the oven. So then we were doing that, and then we had a lot of time for either me to talk. We were juggling, we were tap dancing, not really, because there are certainly a lot of things you can do while your sheet pan's in the oven. We're going to get to those items later because I do want to talk about a lot of those little tasks that we tackle in cooking classes, those little things that just have like major mileage on a dish. But I want to talk about your classes, and I picked out the 3 dishes that I got the most either comments on or questions about afterwards, or that I saw the most customer pictures. And I want you to tell listeners what went into those sheet pans. So the first one is your glazed pork tenderloin with roasted root vegetables.
Well, first of all, there's a couple of things. Your sheet pan has to have sides.
Okay.
And you have to know that the perimeter of your sheet pan is where you put your root vegetables, your potatoes, because you want your proteins on the inside. It's hotter on the perimeter of your sheet pan, okay? A tenderloin, depending on how we cut it. So in most recipes, they keep it whole. You and I need time. We don't have that much time.
Right.
So we'll cut it in half. So this probably was staggering because the meat probably was going to get done faster than the root vegetables. And the root vegetables were probably cut pretty small for the same reason. But the protein should go on the middle of the sheet. And sometimes it's propped up by other vegetables, kind of like a rack.
Ah, explain that.
So if we would do carrots, we would put the carrots in the middle. So when we come to put our meat down, it would act like a rack in a pan, in a roasting pan. So the air could circulate underneath it. That's another plausible way to do it.
Before I get into the other 2, I want to make sure we go into these other 2 recipes that were super popular. Let's back up a little bit. When did sheet pan suppers come on your radar?
Okay, I gave it some thought. I think the first sheet pan supper was 2013-ish, and it wasn't a supper, but it was roasted broccoli. Don't you remember?
When we started
roasting broccoli.
Blasting vegetables at really high heat.
It wasn't even vegetables. It was broccoli.
Okay.
So it was Smidgen Kitchen, and it was Anna Garden. That was the first 2. Ever since then, we were boiling it. We were steaming broccoli.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because that brings me to what is sort of one of my reservations about sheet pan suppers is this whole thinking of brownings. Now, certainly you can spread that broccoli on that sheet pan, and if that's all that's going in that oven, that broccoli is going to get evenly browned and it's going to be fantastic. But when I think about a sheet pan supper that combines the protein and the root vegetables, like that pork tenderloin that you just talked about with the root vegetables, one of my reservations is browning. So as you know, I almost always come from a place of what is that plate going to look like? What is our plating? You know, and when we do classes, I draw our plating. I'm very specific about our eyes eat first, you know, and I want this plate to be beautiful. So I don't want a beige lamb chop.
Okay.
Which isn't fair because you wouldn't put lamb chops on a sheet pan supper.
Yes, you would.
Okay, we'll have to talk about that in a second.
Yes,
Give me a
you
second.
would.
So I don't want beige protein. I don't want beige boneless, skinless chicken breast or pork tenderloin. For someone like me, so what do?
So
I sear first, then move it to the sheet pan.
And that's fair, but it's not a one. It's not
right.
a one pan
Now
supper
everybody's
anymore.
going, hold on, Ann. I thought you were talking about sheet pan suppers. Now you've got me with a skillet and a sheet pan. Let me just say, there's no rules here. Like if you're cooking at home, you're doing it right. But in terms of this specific subject, How does someone like me, what's my approach for that pork tenderloin? Because I don't want it gray or beige. I want golden brown delicious on it. So what do we do in that instance?
With sheet pan suppers, and the reason it works well at your store is because you have to approach it with flavor. Because you're right, we're not braising, which is a great way to get flavor.
Right.
We're not searing braising.
And getting fond.
And not getting fond. So what you have to do is you have to season heavily. So we've got that covered with all our spice blends, right?
Right.
We have to bring flavor. We do that with our oils and our vinegars, right? You have to have something like that. It has to be a hoisin sauce. It has to be your fig barbecue sauce. It has to be, that's how you're going to get the flavor. You're going to coat the meat with it, the protein, and it's going to run into the vegetables, get on that sheet pan, caramelize with the rest of your onions and your bell peppers or your zucchini. And that's how you're getting color. You're adding color.
Okay.
It's a glaze.
The heat, though, of the oven, the dry heat of the oven, is going to help promote browning. Not the same way
that you want it.
Searing on the skillet, but there are ways to get there. I think your broiler is another way.
Sure. Yeah, you switch it up.
Perhaps at the end with that broiler on to get that color on there.
Right. We just never have had that alternative at the store.
Sure, but at home that's available.
Right. Good point.
Let's go back to those 3 recipes that I pulled as your most popular from your sheet pan classes that you teach at the shop. The next one is, and this is a go-to in my house. This is one of Greg's favorites. Tarragon mustard chicken with champagne pear caramelized onions. What? So good. Talk about that. What's the cut of chicken?
We usually use a bone-in chicken thigh.
Skin on?
Skin on.
The open, dry heat of the oven is going to help crisp up that chicken skin, because let's talk about chicken skin.
Right.
That, we want it.
We want it to be crunchy.
Crispy.
But we also know that we have learned that seasoning ahead of time is how you're going to get there.
So that early salting of that chicken thigh is going to help us with that crispy skin. Here's the thing about those onions and why it works on this pan is because the bone-in skin on thigh, that takes a little minute to cook. You've already got thyme on your side, and you need time to caramelize an onion. A traditionally caramelized onion is a labor of love in a skillet. It takes, I've had it take up to an hour to do. That bone-in skin on chicken thigh is buying you time in the oven for those onions to do their thing.
And then you have the fat rendering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That makes it happen.
Yeah, all magic. And then the next one, which is really interesting to me because I'm super persnickety about my salmon, and I like a nice crust on salmon. That's where I've got my skillet and my sheet pan. You've seen me do it a million times. Your sheet pan honey ginger salmon, that is one I see customers post on Facebook over and over and over. They keep going back to that recipe. What is it about that recipe that makes it one that they keep returning to?
Our rub and our honey ginger balsamic.
Okay, what's the rub on that?
It's a mango chipotle.
Okay.
So we have brown sugar in there.
So we're using my mango chipotle blend, which is pretty spicy, and it's got a good bit of sugar in it. So it's going to do that thing that we want to happen.
That you love to see do. That caramelization.
Right. And but the fat in the salmon, a salmon's a fish that can take that, because that's a solid punch of flavor from that spice blend.
True, because mangoes and salmon like each other, and lemon zest, and that's what's in that blend. There are affinities to each other.
On that sheet pan, what vegetables, thinking about a salmon and the time it takes to cook salmon. Now, this is a salmon that is unseared. Am I correct?
Correct.
It goes on the sheet pan without it being seared. So you've had 0 cooking time at that point. How many minutes do you feel that those pieces of salmon take to cook, and what is your vegetable of choice for that protein?
Okay, so this is quick, and it's going to be a high heat. It's going to be 450, 475. It's going to be convection, hopefully. So you're going to go light. You're going to go asparagus. You're going to go zucchini. You're going to do short cooking times. Things that match. Now, you can do potatoes, but you're going to preheat your sheet pan, because that's a thing. Because that way, when you put your potatoes cut side down, they're going to get brown because you have a hot sheet pan. You've preheated that sheet pan. So that's a method. That can go in for 10, 15 minutes before you put your fish on it. It's called staggering. But if you choose proteins and vegetables that cook the same amount of time, that can all be done at one time. But everybody needs to be seasoned, and everybody has to have been tossed in some oil, and then all put together.
So this is going to be a little disconcerting for some listeners, but I think we need to talk about it. Let's talk about the chill that needs to be taken off that salmon. Steaks, that's pretty common. People understand that their steaks, even their Thanksgiving turkey, you need to let that sit on the countertop for a little while, take the chill off, because cold protein going into a hot oven or, hot grill is not.
Well, the proteins just shrink up. And then number two, it just takes longer.
Right. So everybody's really weird about fish, but even if that salmon were to sit out 10 minutes or so to take that chill off, that's really, really important in terms of being able to achieve any sort of crust that's possible on that fish in the oven.
Well, and that we're going to finish it off with a glaze. Mm-hmm. And our choices on that recipe is a honey ginger balsamic.
Those sheet pans are great for getting all of the components of the meal on the pan, but it's also great for buying you time in the kitchen. Let's go through some of the rules about sheet pans. Okay. Which is better? These are all trick questions, by the way. Which is better, parchment or foil?
I'm going parchment.
All the time?
Yeah.
You would never foil line your sheet pan? What about a slab pie?
Oh, yeah. Okay. If it's going up the edges, for sure.
Okay. So something that's going up the edges. But you prefer parchment?
I do.
True or false? A sheet pan is the same as a jelly roll pan.
No.
You got it right.
No, not a bit. It's
too
flimsy?
Yeah.
It's not the right
jelly
size?
Roll pans are very thin, and they warp with the high heat, and lots of sheet pans are cooked at a high heat, which leads us to our next question. 350 degrees for all sheet pans.
We already know that. I know this.
False.
Yes.
How dare you?
What did we say? 350 is for cookies.
It's for chumps. Mm-hmm. It's a bill of goods that Betty Crocker sold us for cakes. So crank up the heat. You may have to, when I went to culinary school, they were like 90% of a chef's job is managing heat. And it's not a lie. That is very true. So you may start at like 450. And sure, some things could happen. You may have to pop your heat down a little bit to manage things. But almost everything is starting at a really, really high heat.
The point of this is a sear.
Right. I'm going to give you some ingredients for a sheet pan, and you're going to tell me what vegetables you would pair with that protein and why. Okay. A white flaky fish like black drum.
Okay. I'm doing very thinly sliced potatoes and making a little potato cake. And I'm doing
really?
thyme and I'm doing lemon, and they're going to be thin, like mandolin.
Like
thin.
mandolin.
Yeah.
Potatoes.
Yes. And I'm going to put them on the bottom, and I'm going to put that nice piece of fish on top, and I'm doing lemon and thyme and some flavored oils.
Okay.
Some nice spices.
Okay. So that piece of black drum, it's cooking in what temp are you going in, and what's kind of happening?
You start your potatoes at a high heat. Give it a head start.
Oh, okay. So this is a two-parter.
But it's not that much of staggering because they're super thin. And then you're going to give it a few minutes, get it started, and then place an oiled, seasoned piece of fish on top with some thyme and some lemon slice.
Okay. That white flaky fish, what red stick spice blend and oil are you using?
Let's see. I'm definitely going to use probably a lemon garlic oil.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe don't you have a Bayou blend?
Mm-hmm. Bayou seafood?
Bayou seafood blend.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I like it. All right. Lamb meatballs.
Love them. What am I doing with them?
Yeah. What vegetables going on that sheet pan? What's happening with those? And what are the products that are going into those lamb meatballs?
Okay. First of all, we're probably going to cut them with some pork because not all of us love lamb like I do.
Okay. So it that helps with the gaminess?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to put some garlic and we're going to put some cilantro. We're going to do, let's think about this. We might want some texture with some panko. You also could put a nut in there. Have you done that yet?
Oh, like pine nuts?
You can do a chopped pine nut or a chopped walnut. It makes really good texture.
What?
So you can make a crispy sheet pan supper, and you just do those on the sheet pan, and you make a salsa verde.
While those meatballs are roasting away, you're making that salsa verde.
Yeah, which is, it could be cilantro, parsley, garlic, lemon zest, oil. I mean, for people that hadn't made one. And it has a splash of vinegar.
Yeah, starts to look like a lot like a chermoula.
Yeah.
Those meatballs, again, that brown that I'm looking for, a meatball is actually one that's fairly easy because partway through roasting, you can pull it and shake the pan.
But also,
and move them around and get that browning going.
You are, but you're going to have a layer of oil on the sheet pan.
Okay. And which oil with that lamb?
It could be harissa.
Okay. That's spicy harissa. Olive oil. Okay. This is a trick question. Bone-in, thick-cut pork chops.
And what's the trick?
Are there times when it's just not the right thing for a sheet pan? Could that be a protein that we reserve for another time? And if so, what cut of pork? Is there a pork chop that works? And with what?
Honestly, I haven't done a pork chop on a sheet pan.
Okay.
I've done pork tenderloins. I've done pork meatballs.
And I think that's our answer.
Yeah, I haven't done one.
Because I know you do those pork chops in a cast iron skillet.
All day.
Yeah, and they're pretty dynamite. Okay.
And, I think I'm going to reserve that for a one pot with maybe a rice underneath it.
Okay.
After you sear it, put a top on.
Okay.
And get everybody done that way.
So it's red stick spice. We have to ask this question. What are you putting on a sheet pan with a boneless, skinless chicken breast? Lily's like,
I thought we couldn't use chicken breast.
I thought we couldn't use
chicken breast at red stick spice. What are we going to use?
What's your blend in oil for that sheet pan, and what vegetables are going? They take a little minute to cook, especially if you leave it whole and unpounded. And let's talk about that. Let's just go ahead and cut that sucker in half and pound it thin.
Yeah,
let's do that.
Let's
do
that. If I'm going to cook a whole boneless chicken breast, it's going to be in a casserole dish with a good marinade.
Okay,
it's going to have some juice.
So a little more of a braising kind of situation,
and it's coming out
supper
right at 165.
Okay.
Immediately.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we're going to wrap this up.
But you didn't get my vegetable.
Oh, what's your vegetable with that chicken?
Roasted tomatoes and broccoli.
Oh, my favorite.
Okay.
So we're definitely going to link to that in show notes because everybody needs to know Lily's roasted tomato recipe because I live on that all summer. When tomatoes are coming out of our ears, that's what I do with them. If you had to teach a novice cook, a brand new cook, one sheet pan supper, what would it be?
Oh, we're going to do roasted broccoli. She needs to know that. And chicken thighs, for sure. Just simple.
Okay. All right. This was fun.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Lily.
You're welcome.
Okay, that was great information from Lily. I'm ready to cook a sheet pan supper for sure. But now let's get the social media take from Chelsea. Hi, Chelsea.
Hi, Ann.
How are you?
Good.
Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So you are my social media manager. Mm-hmm. You've been with me. It's over 2 years now, right?
Yes.
So you came in and you started handling all of our Facebook posts and Instagram and, all things social media. And we've had some pretty big learning moments. Well, for me, first of all, and I'm sorry, you still have to explain the difference between an Instagram feed and an Instagram story. So I'm getting there. But we also got through the whole Pinterest issue of our recipes not posting to Pinterest. And you got to the bottom of it and they said it was explicit. It wasn't posting because it was explicit
content.
Yeah. Butts and breasts, as in pork butts and chicken breasts. So we made headway with Pinterest
that
there.
Was a big learning moment.
Yes. But thank you for all you do for us. We have I think, outstanding social media presence, and you are 100% the reason for that. So thank you. But you're here for a very specific reason because this whole episode is about me trying to get, I get cranky about things that get popular on social media. And you're here to help me get to the bottom of why a thing that we've been doing for a very long time, which is baking, why it's this new and shiny hashtagable thing called sheet pan suppers. Now, what I did find way prior to that is a term called tray baked dinners. So
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, that's never going to work. Like, no alliteration. Like, that's a terrible name. So, but I'm curious from your perspective as a social media person, and you are constantly watching what's happening out there in the world. You are constantly coming to me with terms and ideas that you're finding and you're like, this is trending. Maybe we should do something around this.
Mm-hmm.
And there's certain things like sheet pan suppers and probably like meal prep that really seem to take hold much more voraciously and longer than others. Like, how's all this work? Like, why are they such a thing?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I feel like they are very attainable. So everything is on one pan. I can cut potatoes, carrots, and chicken and put it on a pan, season it, and it's very attainable. But they're also post-worthy too.
Okay. Explain more about post-worthy.
So we talk a lot about our phones eat first in a lot of cases. So you go to a restaurant, you want to take a picture of your meal, post it to your Insta story. And I feel like with sheet pan suppers, it's very colorful on the pan usually because you're putting a lot of different ingredients together. And when you post it, people are like, what is that? And they feel like they can do that at home themselves. Just buy the ingredients and put them on a pan and you're done.
From the perspective, let's talk about first as a perspective of you in real life, as just a person who is a young mother, young family, and you're busy, you're working. Charlie Joe is very, very young. For you, what you see is something that can get done quickly.
Yeah, honestly, you talk about red beans on Mondays and different things like that. I feel like a sheet pan supper is like one of my days of the week. It's just an easy, I have all the ingredients there's to put on a pan and make it work for during the week.
Really? Yeah. Is it Saturday or Sunday? Because it would really help me if it was more alliteration. Sheet pan Saturday, sheet pan Sunday.
No. Well, so on Sunday when I'm trying to meal prep, but I love your outlook
that's another
on
podcast.
That. I know. But honestly, I'm usually cooking chicken thighs, not breasts, chicken thighs. And
trained her well.
And some vegetables or something so that that's my lunches for the week. Usually a chicken, salad, and maybe potatoes or carrots or something like that.
In addition to being a social media manager for me and other businesses in town, you own a boutique.
Yes.
So you own a boutique in Port Allen, Louisiana. It's called Sosis. So you are definitely not a stranger to trends.
Right.
And what happens with trends. Tell me about, I'm curious, and you can speak from the place of fashion and what you see in your boutique. What's like the life cycle of a trend?
It's interesting. I mean, I feel like influencers today really impact what we buy, whether it's food or fashion. And I feel like when you're talking about social media platforms, where trends might start on which platform, I really do think it's different based on what industry, but I also think that where the generation that you're targeting lives the most, like for me, it might be Instagram.
Okay.
That the food bloggers or the fashion bloggers that I follow on Instagram, they really do impact what I buy, whether I buy it through their swipe up links or what I want to wear on Saturday night. I'm like, I really want to try that white on white trend, you know? Or I really want to try the sheet pan supper that this blogger made, so influencers play a big role, but I also think, where you're getting your information, what social or where you live the most on as far as social media platforms go, really impact that as well. Because the information you see on Facebook, it looks different. It's not as photo heavy. I mean, there are lots of photos, but it's also links to articles and stuff like that. So a person living most on Facebook will probably click the article and read in more in depth. So then they're grabbing the exactly where to buy that top or that pair of jeans or that recipe.
Yeah. I'm curious what you think about the difference between original ideas and then in capturing trends. I'm immediately going to avocado toast. It's fascinating to me, first of all, that we wrote about it to begin with because it's avocado on toast. But that someone could still blog about that, and I think the social media world might be done. I'm not done. I'm down for avocado toast anytime.
Any time of day.
But it's interesting to me that what propels that person to get up that morning and say, got to do that avocado toast.
Right. Well, when you're talking about, when you're talking about like original ideas versus being a follower. I mean, I definitely think that sometimes we don't even know when we're being influenced, whether it is an influencer or it's just a social media, like you just kind of see your friends going to a local coffee shop and getting their avocado toast, and your friends, oh, I really want to try to make that at home. But I think that making things your own, if you are going to go into a trend, whether that is in fashion or in food, you have to make it your own. So, you taking on a sheet pan supper, in one of your, or cooking, hosting a whole class on sheet pan suppers, you might be talking about the trend of sheet pan suppers, but it's definitely red stick spices, sheet pan suppers, you know?
Define influencer. Paint what that person looks like, what they do in a day.
Okay. In the most traditional form of an influencer, I would say they are someone that blogs and takes photos of themselves using products or wearing things or doing certain things in real life. So it's usually, maybe it's different products, but working it into their real life and post on social media about it for a living. So that might be they blog twice a week and they have photo shoots every other week, and they're shooting content for 2 weeks, but it's a post a day. It's Insta storying their day to day using products that have either been, some start out where they're just asking for products to be gifted to them.
So I get those inquiries sometimes, and you and I talk about each one and make decisions on each one. But does it ever happen backwards where a brand reaches out, sees an influencer and reaches out to them?
100%. I mean, I think that once an influencer has made it, and it's a lot harder now with all the algorithms changing. I mean, even influencers are educating me a lot on Insta stories, on how Instagram's algorithms changed and why I'm not seeing any of their posts, and to go like their last 5 posts to be able to see them in my feed again. But I think that brands have shifted, not all, but a lot, have shifted a lot of their digital efforts to engaging with influencers.
Okay. So I have never purchased anything on Instagram. You just described a swipe up.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So I've never done that. I've never responded to anything from, I couldn't even tell you, an influencer. So true or so is it true or false that I have never been influenced?
I would have to challenge you and say false, because I think that you might be being influenced even when you don't think you are, and even if that buying decision is delayed and made later, but maybe it's just something that you mindlessly were scrolling, and then you think you're in the store one day and you're like, man, that was some mineral-based sunscreen that I really need to get into, because I don't know why. Somebody on my feed was telling me I really don't need to buy sunscreen with iron in it anymore. I need to buy this. So I think that we can be influenced by a lot of different brands and people online. So I don't think you have to be this very traditional form of an influencer. I think that Red Stick Spice is an influencer. I feel like you're influencing, encouraging people to cook more at home, and definitely influencing what people cook, and their approach to cooking, and making it attainable, maybe with sheet pan suppers, starting there and then going all the way.
Oh my gosh, I've learned so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. This was big fun.
Yep.
I always feel smarter after I talk to Chelsea, so that was awesome. Now we're going to find out a little bit more from Erin.
So I kind of started to realize people always just asked me where they should go eat. And I think because it's always been a thing I've been obsessed with. I'm always like looking for the new place to try, looking for the new thing to try. And I was like, why do people think I know these things? And so I was like, started thinking about it. I was like, I kind of do know these things. I'm kind of an enthusiast. I'm kind of always out there trying new stuff. And so I was like, what if I just I told no one I was doing this. I just started posting because I felt like if people are asking me for this, maybe more people want to know, and I just don't know those people, and maybe they are interested too. And so I just kind of went for it.
Something my social media manager and I talk about often is influencers, social media influencers, and that, social media in general influences what we do. But there are influencers out in the world. Do you consider yourself an influencer?
I think it depends just how you define that, because I think some people think influencers in the terms of they're being paid or sponsored to post what they're posting, whereas like I'm not being paid by any of the restaurants I visit to go there. But at the same time, I do hope people see my feed and go try a dish. You know, I hope I'm influencing people to go try something they haven't tried before. But I guess in the technical term of what that might mean, I'm not being paid to do any of this. So,
and when you are at a restaurant, are you ordering genuinely what you're hungry for and what you like, or are you ordering and taking photos of what you feel your followers would want to see? I guess it's more about, are there foods that are lovely to photograph that maybe aren't your favorite?
Sort of. So a lot of times, like you have your go-to dish at a restaurant, and that's we all do. But the blog does make me think, well, wait, let me try something I haven't had here before so that I can post it. So I guess sometimes I am changing what I would have maybe ordered to get some new content. But it's not something I don't like. I'm not gonna go that far. I'm still gonna get something I enjoy. But luckily I pretty much like everything, so.
Catherine, my producer, and I were talking earlier. She moved here not too very long ago. You and I are both Louisiana natives. Mm-hmm. I'm from Laplace. You're from Gonzales, yeah. Right? And she said something that I didn't realize. I do this as well. She said after she moved here and had been here a little bit and started meeting folks, they would lean in and they'd say, "Where have you eaten?"
Yes, that's the first thing I ask people.
And then the follow-up was, "And what did you order?" Mm-hmm. And I was like, ooh, I do that. Do you think that's unique to us in terms of that fixation on what did you eat?
I think that's probably a Southern thing. I think it comes from, like, if you have Southern roots, or especially if you're Cajuns, your family's Cajun, you've spent so much of your life thinking, how can I feed people? Like, it's how my family operates. You know, we were always feeding everyone. And I love that about my family. And now it's like, if you're here, there's so much good food to try that's so specific to our region, especially if you're visiting from out of town. I want to make sure you had that food. It breaks my heart when I hear someone just say they went to like some chain restaurant when they were here a few times. I'm like, oh, we have so much good stuff. Like, that breaks my heart.
Yeah. So I think it kind of, I think we're about to answer my next question. That whole, why do we like pictures of food so much? You know, I find they're just everywhere in terms of Instagram feeds and Pinterest. Mm-hmm. And even though, you know, it's sometimes frustrating for me because folks aren't cooking so much, but we seem to really just like looking at pictures of food. What do you think that's about?
You know, I think it's that age-old like debacle of like, what are we going to have for dinner? No matter if it's cooking or eating, or even growing up, my mom cooked dinner every night. I still cook regularly, but there was still that debate in my house every single day about like, what's for dinner. I think even before social media, it's something we were always thinking about all day anyway, and now we just have the pictures to kind of help us along the way. And so we're banking ideas of what we might want to eat when we have to like make that tough decision the next time, or we're just like banking ideas. Next time we go out, I want to go here. So you have it ready.
That was awesome, Erin. Now we are moving over into the Red Stick Spice Test Kitchen, and we're going to cook up sheet pan tacos with Sarah.
We're back. Welcome to Smidgen. We are off to the races in our cooking segment for this episode. I'm back in the kitchen with Sarah.
Hello.
Love having Sarah on staff. She is game for anything.
Yes.
So thanks for coming back and cooking with me.
You're welcome.
We are in the test kitchen at Red Stick Spice Company here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and we are cooking a very Instagrammable meal, or so they say out there in the world. So, all right, so before we talk too much, we do need to get this in the oven. So we are making a completely plant-based, vegetable-forward sheet pan supper that's going to end up being a taco. So we've got different vegetables here that are going to go on sheet pans into the oven, but we absolutely can't put them all on sheet pans. I'll explain that in a second. First, what I want you to do is peel these carrots, and then you're going to cut them in the same way that we cut these earlier, into these sticks like this. And then I'm going to thinly slice this onion into half moons, and then work to get all of these on the sheet pan. We're going super traditional with a jalapeno olive oil, and then our Taco Tuesday seasoning, which is the name of the seasoning. It's called Taco Tuesday, just like the day and the seasoning that you would use on that day, or any day, frankly. That's blended by a local blender here in Baton Rouge, and it's pretty delicious. Okay, so we've got some half moons of onion, and I also need some half moons of red onion. So, dishes that become Insta-worthy, you know, or start to trend, or maybe the term is go viral. And one of them is what we're doing right now, which is a sheet pan supper. Okay. Which is, I'm a little bit older, and it's kind of funny to me because this is also known as baking.
Right.
But I think it's interesting that this thing my mother did my whole life that I've been doing is suddenly this trendy term called sheet pan suppers.
Right.
So, but for sure, I'm all for it, especially if folks are cooking at home. If this is something,
I am definitely a fan of a sheet pan meal.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was Instagram worthy. I guess I should be taking more pictures while I'm cooking.
Lots and lots of them out there, and some of them
I didn't know it was so on trend.
I don't quite believe, because I wonder, did you really cook all those things on that one sheet pan? I don't think you did.
Right, or does it just look pretty?
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on with you. From other episodes, folks may not remember, but you have a professional organizing business.
Yes, I sure do.
And I love having you in here at the store with me for cooking classes. And I'm curious what you think of what we're doing right here with this whole setup of everything ready to go before we even start cooking.
So yeah,
from an organization standpoint, are you digging it?
I am digging it because I love a good color coordination. So we've got all of our different vegetables kind of all looking pretty on the...
Do you arrange your clients' closets, clothes by color?
If they let me.
Color.
If they let me, I try. But I even get to the point where like bookshelves, things like that. My books are by color for sure.
I love it.
Sometimes a client will say, I don't need to do by color. I just want it by, type or whatever. But if they allow it, I do everything by color. I'm talking even canned goods in a pantry by color, just because it's so pretty to look at.
Yeah. So what we're doing, getting everything in its place, everything ready to go, is a culinary term called mise en place, which means everything in its place. And for some folks, it's a little counterintuitive. Like, it seems like we worked and then we're going to work again cooking.
Right.
Why not just kind of do this on the fly?
As you go.
Or as you go.
Right.
And there's certainly going to be dishes that you can do that you just are back pocket recipes that you know so well. You can definitely do that in some instances. But for cooks who maybe are starting out or perhaps aren't super confident, mise en place is definitely a great practice to set in place. So we've got everything that we're going to cook with already ready to go. We've got canned beans and frozen corn here. We're not scrambling to go find it in the pantry and then rinse it. It's all ready to go. So there's this big trend toward meal prep, which I think is awesome. And for me, this is meal prep. It's less about making casseroles and putting them in the freezer and more about getting the components to my meals for later in the week ready to go. So you have just completed a beautiful
Yes, this looks gorgeous. I'm seeing the whole rainbow here, and I'm loving it. We got the red peppers, the orange carrots, the yellow peppers, the purple onions. We needed something blue, which is kind of really hard to do because all I can think of is blueberries. And I don't think that'll go good on the sheet pan.
Not a lot of blue food.
Yeah.
Okay. So we are going to start getting these on the sheet pan.
Okay. And you said we were separating the ingredients. So what are we putting with what?
To you, have you ever cooked carrots?
Yes.
They take a little minute.
Yeah, they take a little bit longer. Yeah, for sure. So those are going to go probably by themselves, correct?
The carrots are going to go by themselves, but we are going to load them up with some yellow onion. Because I do want some onion to caramelize alongside the carrots.
Definitely.
The carrots have a higher sugar content than other vegetables, so they are going to release some sugars and they're going to caramelize, which is all just amazing goodness that goes right along with onion. So we definitely want to get some onion on there with it. So exactly what you're doing, keep doing that. And then I'm going to, on the other sheet pan, and I'm going to do this number. This is what you see on Instagram. They start,
rainbow.
Yes.
I'm guilty. I've definitely done it before and thought I was,
So that's,
apparently sort of an influencer with my sheet pan meals and my
There you
rainbow,
go.
my rainbow sheet pan.
So that's where the phone comes out when you start seeing these stripes of color on the
Love
pan. And we're also going to add some black beans and corn to this pan. What's going to happen with these black beans and corn is they're going to cook pretty much, you're kind of looking for cooking to smithereens a little bit, because I do want a little bit of crispiness on that corn and black beans. That's kind of fun to have on the taco. Okay, let's get some black beans on here. So we've got these 2 sheet pans set up, ready to go. Really important about what you put on what sheet pan. So a carrot takes a little minute to cook, so we want to make sure those are separate on the sheet pan, but definitely loaded up with some onion for sure. On our other sheet pan, that's where we have our red onion, bell pepper, corn, and black beans. And what I did is I made these really cool stripes, color by color, on the sheet pan.
You know I love that color.
Yeah, and absolutely take a picture with your phone before you bake it. But nice stripes of color, really beautiful, and then those go in the oven and they roast together.
And so we'll put the carrots in first, and are we putting
we're
them
going
all
to put
in
it all in. You're going to be monitoring them, and certainly pulling this sheet pan before we pull the sheet pan with the carrots. So let's get all this corn on here, but it cannot go in there just like this.
Okay.
So we need our jalapeno olive oil. So that's a great infused extra virgin olive oil that we sell here in the shop. I'm not a big fan of lots of spicy heat. It really gets to me.
Yeah.
We recently,
am I putting this on this one as well?
We recently had an incident where there was a pretty drastic measuring error. What was supposed to be a quarter teaspoon was a tablespoon.
And it turned out delicious, I bet,
chili
right?
flakes.
Yeah,
and
it was so good. Everyone loved it.
I needed a moment, and everyone else thought it was the greatest thing. So, but our jalapeno olive oil, it's what I would call mild heat, but you can taste, a jalapeno is a really flavorful chili.
Yeah.
That fruit, it's a fruit and tastes really, really good.
Right.
Without all that crazy heat, I love the flavor of a jalapeno, and that's what our oil does. Okay,
That's
Taco
good.
Tuesday blend going on everything. And we're going to be pretty generous with that. Let's get that moving around.
So what kind of spices are in the Taco Tuesday?
So
cumin.
Your overriding spice in a Latin spice blend is going to be cumin. But you definitely want to taste some coriander as well. There's onion, garlic, oregano. Big difference between Greek oregano and Mexican oregano. And so we've got Mexican oregano in here, and she's got paprika. It's a local female chef named Tracy who blends this for us.
Oh, okay.
And
Is that the singing chef, Tracy?
Yeah, she was our karaoke. She was here for karaoke cooking, and she
definitely got the party started.
Yeah, she opened up the night with "I Will Survive," and then we were off to the races for sure with karaoke cooking. Okay, let's get a little bit more on there. And then we will go in the oven with this, and then we're going to make a salsa to go with these tacos. So here we go into a blazing hot 450-degree oven. We're going to monitor these, but we're going to be within probably 12 minutes with this sheet pan and probably closer to 20 with the carrots. But we'll just keep an eye on them, but definitely crank that heat up. No 350 degrees here. We want to go in a really hot oven, and we'll be eating tacos shortly.
Right.
All right. Okay, salsa time. All right, so let's move our food processor over. This is a restaurant-style salsa that I love how it comes together in the food processor here. And so this is just like we dump it all in and we turn the food processor on.
That sounds great to me.
And you just made salsa.
Right.
But this is definitely a very, not a chunky salsa at all. Super smooth and puree.
Yeah, I like that better.
It's makes a fairly large volume. We use 1 jalapeno, and we left the seeds and membranes in, so we're going to have a little bit of heat going on there. So let's get our tomatoes in.
Okay, and so we're using, these are whole tomatoes?
Those are whole canned tomatoes. So I'm not a big fan of processed food, but there are minimally processed foods that are really good, and canned tomatoes is one of them.
So it's canned tomatoes and then some diced tomatoes as well.
Correct. And then we've got an onion going in that's just rough chopped. Your cut chop doesn't really matter here. It's not important because we're food processing it. You get that jalapeno in. And we've got a nice big handful of cilantro. Are you team cilantro?
I am team cilantro. I hear that there's a lot of people that think it tastes like soap,
My husband.
which is very strange, but I am team cilantro.
Yeah. He is having nothing to do with any cilantro.
Do you put stems in?
I can eat a cilantro salad.
Well, I don't know about all that. Yeah, but I do like a lot of cilantro.
Yeah.
Do you leave a few stems on?
I do.
I've kind of heard a few different things on that. Some people like to put a few stems in for extra flavor.
Oh, I could see that. I'm just lazy. I
break
left the stems on, and they're going to get pureed, so I'm not too concerned about it.
Well, that'll save me time because I usually sit there and pick all the leaves off when I'm doing something with cilantro. So
it depends on how I'm using it. If it's a garnish and I want that whole leaf of cilantro, definitely, and I'm doing that Instagram-worthy photo,
right? Exactly.
I'm a little more careful. But if it's a rough chop of something that gets sprinkled at the end, I leave the stems
Just leave
in.
some on.
Yeah. And then we need to get some cumin in here. We're gonna read our recipe today because of that whole tablespoon of chili flakes.
Yeah. So let's make sure that we put in the right amount of cumin.
We've got a
fourth of a teaspoon,
quarter
not
teaspoon,
a tablespoon.
Correct. Quarter teaspoon cumin. We need some salt in here, so we've got a quarter teaspoon of salt.
But it was a beautiful mistake. So
yeah.
Came out
and
good.
Then let's get some lime juice in there. So that's half of a whole lime.
And I know how to squeeze it in
there. You go.
In the thing now. Here we go.
And then we put the lid on and we zhuzh. I made that culinary term up. And then we have salsa verde. We just made salsa.
That was so easy.
Right?
Why
and makes a ton of it. Definitely can feed a crowd.
Yeah, that looks good.
Let's taste and see what we think of it.
All right.
See if we need more salt. I'm going to zhuzh it a little bit longer. We've got some big chunks in here, but we can at least taste at this point.
Might need a little more salt.
You want some salt? Okay.
Just a little bit more? What do you think?
That tiny bit of heat? Love that.
Yeah, I'm into it.
All right.
Here we go. Very good. I like it.
Super yummy right now. The longer something like this sits, the better it gets.
Right,
so,
it'll kind of have some time to like soak up.
Yeah, or as my grandmother would say, everything needs to get married. All of this is going to improve, and things that might seem sharp are going to mellow, and then absolutely servable right now. Let's see how we're doing with our vegetables. See if we're getting some nice GBD, golden brown and delicious on these vegetables. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
So we're starting to caramelize around the edges. I can smell those bell peppers. Do you like bell peppers?
Yeah, I love bell peppers.
So they're not my favorite raw.
Oh, really?
But a cooked bell pepper,
my grandmother used to make stuffed bell peppers a lot.
Yeah. Did you eat the bell pepper, or did you just eat
I would
the
usually
stuffing?
just eat the stuffing out, but as an adult now, I think I would have gone for the bell pepper.
Yeah.
I'm definitely into it now.
I loved the cooked bell pepper when my mom would make stuffed bell peppers. Yeah, I love the smell of a cooked bell pepper. These onions are starting to caramelize. I smell the sweetness from the corn. It's got a little ways to go, but we're definitely getting there.
Yeah, and I'm loving the smell of that taco seasoning.
Yeah.
It's getting me excited for Taco Tuesday.
What you want to make sure you do is part of the way through the cooking process with the carrots, I would say give it a good 10 to 12 minutes. With the other vegetables, really after 5 minutes. You want to make sure you pull them out, give them a good stir, and then spread them, make sure they're spread evenly on the sheet pan, and then they go back in the oven. Sometimes I need to adjust the fat on the sheet pan as well. I'll add a little bit more olive oil.
Yeah, I was going to ask if that was okay
dry.
to add a little bit.
That's what's promoting your caramelization is the fat. There are definitely sugars in the vegetables, but the fat is helping things along as well. So you may need to add a little bit of fat. It's hard to put a definitive, like, these are your 3 steps to a perfect sheet pan supper. It depends on where your vegetables came from, what season it is, what's going on in your oven.
Right.
You know, all of those things depend on it. But we definitely want to get that spread around on the sheet pan, back in the oven, and paying close attention to the differences in your vegetables and cooking times. You're definitely going to pull one sheet pan before the other.
Right.
Okay, We're back. You ready to eat a taco?
I'm ready. It smells so good.
Okay. So I'm going to pull the sheet pans from the oven.
Okay.
And I'm going to get you to combine them. So at this point, once they're cooked, you can combine them, put them out on the buffet for your family. You were saying you would do this for a group of friends.
Oh, definitely. I do family dinner night with a group of friends every week, and I think this is something that they would
love that.
We have friends that
that
are vegetarians, so sometimes it's kind of hard to find things to cook, but
this is
they would love this. Yes, for sure.
Yeah. So what else could you add to the carrot sheet pan?
Like, what else would I add?
Yeah, that would be that same sort of long cooking.
Yeah, I would say maybe some sweet potatoes or something like that.
Butternut squash.
Oh yeah, butternut squash for sure.
Or a tradition, or just a potato.
Right,
like a new potato. And then
I love sweet potatoes, so I would probably do some sweet potatoes.
Look at these. They are gorgeous.
So good.
So these carrots are brown. They're starting to curl. We cut them small because we want them to be an easy bite in that taco, but also not be a diced carrot that's going to roll out.
Right. You want something that's going to kind of stay in there.
So if you think of like a strip of fajitas, it's the same sort of thinking with the vegetable to have it that shape. So we use tricolor carrots. We have orange, yellow, purple carrots, and they roasted up beautifully. And you can barely discern the onion at this point. It's so roasted and crispy.
Yeah, I kind of forgot that we put onions on there.
Magical.
So looks like the yellow carrot.
Yeah, and our other sheet pan with our bell pepper, black beans, and corn all caramelized nicely. We did tricolor bell peppers, so we've got all the colors on here. They're all starting to crisp up on the edges and start to curl. The black beans all burst, and they're crispy little nuggets of deliciousness on here. So we can combine these two sheet pans just for ease of serving. So you can add those and then mix them all together while I get our salsa poured and full.
I can definitely see why this was sorry. I just kind of burned my hand a little bit. It's all right. I can see why somebody would want to make this as an Instagram kind of thing because of all the colors.
No, it's absolutely gorgeous.
It looks pretty together.
Okay, so we're making you're burned. I'm making a mess, but
it's okay.
It's all going to be good.
It was just a little tiny little pour of my hand. It was fine.
So that's all ready to go. We've got tortillas. For low or no carb folks, you could do lettuce wraps.
Oh yeah.
I also make a pan of this and have it at the ready for salads during the week. So I'll do a bed of greens and then pile this on top.
Did you do any kind of dressing?
I do the salsa. I do the
so
salsa as the dressing.
Love it.
Let's grab our tortillas that I've been warming. All right, so those are ready to go. They look gorgeous. And then I've got our tortillas.
I'm ready to make some tacos.
All right, so we've got flour tortillas. We've got salsa. Oh, I always spritz a little bit of lime on there.
Okay.
And then
some
you did that beautiful
as well.
cilantro, very Insta-worthy.
Yes, you gotta have a garnish.
This right here is a gorgeous photo, but I say we dig in.
Yes, I'm
Okay.
ready.
All right, so there's your plate. Let me get this out of the way for you.
So I don't burn myself again.
Yeah. Safety first, Sarah.
Thank you.
All right, and let's dig into some tacos.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, can I have a little?
No, it's all for me. I need to get some of those beans on there. I love it.
Perfect.
Yeah,
And
this should be called the rainbow taco.
Yep. Some salsa on there and a little spritz of lime. And then these are pretty big tacos you loaded up, Sarah. So
Yeah,
I think
sorry about that.
our manners are about to go out the window.
Yeah,
as we bite
it's
into these.
gonna just
But let's see how we did.
Maybe I was thinking more of a burrito, but sorry. Is it good?
It's so good.
I'm still garnishing. I want to have a pretty Instagram picture. No, I'm joking. All right,
So-
let's go for it.
I love this because I am a carnivore,
Mm-hmm.
but this is not me missing meat at all. Like, this meal is 100% satisfying. Right?
Oh yeah, for
You did
sure.
so good. Great
Awesome job.
Thank you. Thanks for being in the kitchen.
Anytime.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, I think we cracked the case. We finally got to the bottom of this whole sheet pan supper's origin story. Do some sleuthing on your own with our recipe for sheet pan carrot tacos. We have links to everything mentioned on the show in our show notes or over at redstickspice.com. Find Red Stick Spice on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to learn more about our products, classes, and subscription boxes. Just for Smidgen listeners, we have a special discount code, Smidgen15 for 15% off your entire order. And we have some news. Smidgen is now available on Stitcher. You can also find Smidgen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you get your podcasts. Please subscribe and leave us a review. We would really love to hear what you think of the show. You can also go to smidgenpodcast.com to find everything about the show. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of Smidgen.